So there's 3 different point levels for affordability: 50 points, 70 points, and 100 points. And to obtain 50 points in the program, you have to ensure that 40% of the units in the property are at 30% of the median renter income. So let's get into how affordability is defined and dive into those metrics. So CMHC has defined affordability based on median renter income for the municipality or region that the property is located in. There are specific numbers for median renter income that CMHC has published that we can provide you with. And so what CMHC designates as affordable is units that are at or below the median renter income for that municipality. We'll show you some examples here for major centers in Canada where CMHC has defined the median renter income. Where a property is located outside of these major centers, then median renter income is either defined as the median renter income of a close by major center, along with evidence that the demographics of the property, of the location your property is in, is similar to the demographics of the nearby major municipality. Otherwise, you have to use the median renter income for what CMHC defines as rural median renter income for that province. So to get into the actual specifics, affordability for existing buildings, to get 50 points to start to qualify in the program, you have to have 40% of your units at 30% of the median renter income. To get 70 points in the program, you have to have 60% of the units in the building at or below 30% of the median renter income. And finally, to get 100 points, the maximum number of points in the program, you have to have 80% of the units at 30% of the renter income. 80% of the units at 30% of the median renter income. Now, keep in mind, the affordability commitment is essentially 10 years. And so the other thing is, in addition to having the units being at or below the median renter income, they also must be maintained as affordable for 10 years. And during that 10-year period, the unit itself, regardless of if a tenant moves in or out, the unit itself must remain affordable for that time period. And during that time period, rents can increase by either rent control, if applicable in the province the property is in, and if the province the property is in does not have rent control, then a specific inflation number can apply to allow a building owner to increase rents for an affordable unit. And that specific number is the Consumer Price Index published by Statistics Canada and a specific line item called rented accommodation. And looking at how much Statistics Canada, through their Consumer Price Index, has indicated that rented accommodation for that province has increased over the previous 12 months as the allowable increase in provinces where there is no rent control. Again, this must be maintained for a minimum of 10 years. Keep in mind, if the affordability commitment is increased to 20 years or more, then an additional 30 points are awarded. So, for example, if you have 60% of your units in an existing building at or below median renter income, you get 70 points. And if you commit to that affordability for 20 years instead of 10, then you add 30 points on top of that 70 to get 100 points. Now let's look at energy efficiency. So energy efficiency for existing buildings, there's 3 key tiers to get energy efficiency. That's 30, 50, and 100 points. To get 30 points for energy efficiency, you have to achieve a 15% reduction in the energy efficiency of the building from where it is currently. This can be obtained and verified through an independent third party known as an energy consultant or an energy auditor. Now, we have a list of energy consultant auditors that have worked with CMHC programs in the past that we'd be happy to connect you with. But please know that in order to get the points to this program, you have to have an energy auditor or energy consultant come in. And what they will do is they will evaluate your building as it is today, and they will compare it to what the energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emission will be if you make specific improvements in the program. Now, there is first category here that is a 15% reduction in energy, or 15% improvement, in energy efficiency in a building. It also entails a 15% improvement in greenhouse gas emissions. And both have to be present. To get the 30 points here, you have to have a 50% reduction in the energy consumption, or 15% reduction or 50% improvement in the energy efficiency, which is the same thing, but also having a 15% improvement in the greenhouse gas emissions of the building. Another thing to note here is that to qualify for the program, you actually have to get a minimum of 50 points. So if you look at this first tier here and you get 30 points for a 15% reduction in energy efficiency, then technically on its own, you won't qualify. So you'll have to look at either a higher level of energy efficiency improvement, or combining that 30 points with either accessibility or affordability in order to qualify for the program or get more points in the program. The next tier here is 50 points, which entails a 25% reduction in energy consumption, or 25% improvement in energy efficiency, along with a 25% improvement in greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, 100 points is obtained by obtaining a 40% improvement in energy efficiency and a 40% improvement in greenhouse gas emissions. The final tier here is accessibility. Now, looking at the points here, it's important to note that accessibility alone does not allow somebody to qualify for the MLI Select program, simply because you need to have a minimum of 50 points to qualify for the program, and accessibility alone provides either 20 or 30 points. So accessibility must be paired with one or more other social outcomes like affordability or energy efficiency. However, in order to get points for accessibility, there's a few different ways to get 20 points. The first way is that 15% of the units are considered accessible in accordance with CSA standard B65118, which is a specific building code, national building code standard. Another way to get 20 points in accessibility is that 15% of the units are considered universal design. And finally, the building receives Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certification score of between 60 to 79%, which is a third-party certification that you can obtain. For the other ones, in terms of the building code, universal design metrics, you have to have an independent third party, such as an architect or engineer or accessibility consultant, confirm those percentages. To get 30 points, you have to have a minimum of 15% of the units considered accessible in accordance with CSA standard B65118, and minimum of 85% of units considered universal design, or you have 100% of the units considered universal design, or 100% of the units are considered accessible in accordance with the CSA standard B65118. And finally, you get 30 points if the building receives the Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certification of gold, which entails a score of 80% or better. Now, let's look at what the insurance flexibilities that are provided, or in other words, what are the benefits provided by achieving some of these points for existing buildings. And so to get a minimum of 50 points, you get a specific CMHC premium for having 50 points. That is the highest premium within the MLI Select program. And then you can get up to 85% leverage. Note, 50 points does not give you 95% leverage. It only gives you 85% leverage. The debt coverage ratio is 1.1, which is consistent with all three tiers of points that you can get. The amortization is 40 years for getting that number of points. And those are sort of the key differences to discuss here. Now, when it comes to getting 70 points in the program, that is where now you can start to get leverage of 95%. You get a slightly lower premium than you would if you had 50 points. The debt service coverage is still 1.1, but now you can also get a 45-year amortization. Keep in mind, the amortization is not just allowing for reduced premiums, but it generally also allows for higher leverage, because it's not guaranteed that you get that leverage point. You get that leverage if you also have debt service coverage ratio that is met at that level. So having a higher amortization means lower mortgage payments, and lower mortgage payments means it's easier to meet that ratio. Finally, getting 100 points for existing properties in the MLI Select program will also give you 95% leverage. And the big difference here is that you can get up to 50-year amortization if the building supports it by way of a remaining useful life. And also, you may be eligible for limited recourse in the event you have a borrowing company that has a net worth of 25% of the loan amount being requested.